Neil Knox, The Gun Rights War. This is page 106. Better Tried by 12, The Bernie Goetz Affair, dated July 27, 1987. Bernie Goetz, a gawky, bespectacled, seemingly meek man, has the look that attracts muggers like honey draws flies. He appears old enough and prosper enough to be carrying a fair amount of money, yet as easy to knock over as a penniless old woman. That's the kind of victim the thugs are looking for. Weak, helpless, defenseless. That's the kind of person who has been made easy prey by New York's infamous Sullivan Law and the almost annual amendments to make it more prohibitive since the first enacted in 1911. Those laws have served no purpose other than to assure the city's criminals a safe workplace. That was corrupt politician Big Tim Sullivan's intent for the racketeers whose graft enriched Tammany Hall's political machine were getting shot up by stockkeepers refusing to pay protection money. First-generation immigrants, instilled in the European traditions of subservience, had simply paid the criminals insurance premiums against the beatings, death, and destruction of their shops, substantial portions of which filtered up to Tammany Hall as protection against police interference. But the second generation, native-born Americans, aware of their rights, started buying guns, which they used to defend themselves against Tammany Hall's friends. To protect the hoodlums from armed citizen, Sullivan got the legislator to pass his bill requiring a 50-cent license to possess a handgun. The ostensible reason for the law was not just to inhibit violent criminals, but primarily to control anarchists, a code word for immigrants. The license was issued by police, who in that day were as corrupt as the Tammany Hall bosses who controlled all political offices in New York City. Needless to say, the poor immigrant shopkeepers and those without wealth or political power had no need to apply for a pistol license, for they wouldn't get it, just like today. During a legislative hearing in New York City in 1985, I heard the city police commissioner state that anyone applying for a carry permit is promptly denied. Of course, that doesn't apply to the rich and powerful like New York Times publisher Arthur Sulzberger, or the millionaire who used his legally carried handgun to defend himself, he says, after a traffic accident a few weeks ago. The fact is, those who can ride in limousines, who live in high-rise, high-security apartments, and who are carefully guarded by private police are least likely to need to defend themselves. It's the subway rider who lives in a walk-up flat who most often comes face-to-face with leering, vicious, evil personified, asking for $5 before stabbing or stomping. It's always been an amazement to me that the sole justifiable reason for being allowed a carry permit in most places where such licenses are issued at all is for the protection of regularly carried large sums of money, which conveniently eliminates the poor. Yet the courts have repeatedly held that only protection of life justifies the use of deadly force, not the protection of property. That was the regulation system, the mugger protection system, that Bernie Goetz faced when he tried to get a pistol license. It was merely a coincidence that Tom Sullivan's original targets, he is a second-generation immigrant. Now the law is used to discriminate against everybody, not rich enough or powerful enough to qualify for a license. Editor's note: Franz Kafka never wrote a story so weird as the saga of Bernie Goetz. He was acquitted of assault and attempted murder, the shooting being ruled self-defense, but he's convicted of illegally possessing the means of self-defense, his .38 special revolver. For that crime, he was sentenced to a year in jail. He served about 8 months with time off for good behavior. The NRA board passed a resolution deploring Goetz's situation for being prosecuted for possession of the gun after a shooting that was ruled self-defense, but declined material support. Even that thin statement of support was not without controversy. One director, a law enforcement background, the board decision against defending Knox with the law enforcement summarized the board's decision against defending Getz, saying, "The law is the law, and he broke the law." Neil Knox solicited funds for Getz's defense. Shortly after Getz's trial, his attorney, Barry Slotnick, stated, "To survive in New York City, one is forced to break the law." Slotnick's statement, all the more startling for his being an attorney, stemmed from the worst kind of experience. From within days of Getz's trial wrapping up, muggers had attacked the lawyer with a spiked club, leaving him with serious puncture wounds and a broken wrist. The only one of Getz's 4 would-be muggers who was not later convicted of other violent crimes, including rape, robbery, was the one who was paralyzed. A decade later, a jury, forgetful of the battlefield conditions of New York's 1980s crime wave, awarded the paralyzed victim $43 million for far more than Getz ever had or is likely to make. As a result of that judgment, 10% of Getz's paycheck will go to the plaintiff for 20 years after the date of judgment. The plaintiff is unlikely to see the money since it will go directly against his extensive medical bills. In later years, Getz returned to New York and adopted a rather high profile. As of 2005, he owned a business named Vigilante Electronics that sold used and refurbished test equipment. He appeared in a couple of low-budget movies, ran for city political office, submitted a plan to rebuild the World Trade Center exactly as it was originally, and became a vegetarian activist campaigning for radical animal rights organizations. He is generally regarded as an eccentric by observers across the political spectrum. If he seems to have a couple of screws loose, consider what he's been through. The next section is Self-Defense Ads Draw Fire, page 109, dated November 17th, 1987. Gerald Vaughn, executive director of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, blasted the NRA's highly emotional self-defense ads in an article in yesterday's Washington Post. That series of ads which lead lines like, "You should shoot a rapist before he kills you," and "How much red tape is too much red tape when he threatens to kill you," has triggered a swarm of furious editorials and a fusillade of sputtering anti-NRA, anti-self-defense letters in every newspaper that has published them. That response convinces me that the ads are better than I thought. As the late Jim Featherstone used to say, when you're tickling someone, it's nice to know when they're laughing. Jim was head of the NRA Institute's legal division during my watch. He died of cancer in the summer of 1987. His death was a loss to the pro-gun movement. NRA's previous series of sweet "I am the NRA" ads drew some derogatory snorts from the news media, but they were primarily designed to promote NRA membership. They came out of the NRA Institute's budget, giving the appearance of an aggressive action while avoiding making any congressman unhappy. The current ads go for the anti-gun opposition's throat, which is why they should be applauded, even if they were not totally pleased with them. These ads represent a major change in direction for the NRA, self-defense with firearms, despite the popular Armed Citizen column in The Rifleman, has always been played down or avoided by the NRA hierarchy. The majority of the NRA leadership, particularly past President John Schooley, opposed all shooting games that featured man-like targets and opposed allowing civilians to enter any of the NRA's police matches. Never mind the man-like targets used in Olympic pistol shooting. One reason the NRA establishment was so infuriated by former director Paul Heath Till, in addition to his reminders to the disparity reminders of the disparity between their promises and their performance was that he unceasingly pushed for the adoption of a women's firearm self-defense course. Judge Till and other leaders of the Houston Sportsmen's Coalition and old friends and former directors John Wooters and Francis Winters had set up a highly effective program that they wanted NRA to adopt. The leadership steadfastly refused, and until finally forced to adopt a watered-down program that didn't mention self-defense with guns, the NRA has jumped into self-defense with both feet. Good. Women particularly need to know how they can use a firearm to equalize the odds. While there may not be time to get at a defensive gun, without a gun, there's no option for use. And despite all the prattling about a gun adding to the danger, only 3% of attempted victims who are armed are raped. According to the Florida State University criminologist Gary Kleck, handguns are used for self-defense 600,000 times a year, though not fired 2/3 of the time. A lone, defenseless woman threatened with an intruder is a standard movie plot. If the woman had a gun, there would be no plot and no movie. Once a woman learns how to use a gun for self-defense and experiences the greater peace of mind that it provides, woe be to the man who tries to take it away from her. Thank you for supporting our projects. If you'd like to buy us a cup of coffee, check out our Patreon channel.
The guys and gals at gunwebsites.com encourage you to take a CCW class every year, practice at least once a month, and carry every day. Thank you for watching gunwebsites.com.